chapter clicked in to College Volleyball Weekly on Viral Volley Media. Now here's your host, Rob on mic.
All right, we have our first episode of a College Volleyball Weekly Men's Top 15, which could be changing soon, but we shall soon see because other news on the front, but we have other news. A couple things. Big news in the MIVA Dan's conference. It's now called the MIVA Championship or Tournament Championship is now going to be called the Don Shundell Championship Trophy. So I'll let Dan speak to that really quick and explain why that was such a big news for the conference.
Yeah, I was certainly Don Shondell is I think a legacy when it comes to volleyball just across the country, and to have our tournament trophy be representative of him and what he's done over the course of his career is probably long overdue in my eyes, and probably a lot of others. And so I think it's a great way to honor him and his family and all those things. And so, if you need to read a little bit more about Don and don't know, then I would say get online and read a little bit and how many wins that guy had and how many NCAA tournaments he made and how many trophies he won himself. But he really was a driving component for the MIVA conference and Midwest volleyball and the growth of men's volleyball across the country.
Wow, Dan, that's a great segue because growth of men's volleyball is what we're going to be talking about, and a longtime resource that we've been looking for, a pioneer, so to speak, of the growth of men's and boys volleyball is middlehitter.com. That website had so many great pieces that I think a lot of us, we didn't really mention, we look at, but we honestly did. That's run by Jerry Strub, who's a Chicago native, I believe, right? Because
Yep.
whenever I was at USA events at Hoffman Estates or in Chicago, he was always there supporting the men's. But Jerry Strub, 18 years of middlehitter.com, is going into retirement, and he's looking to someone to hopefully carry on that journey covering men's and boys. And in case you're not familiar with it, basically he created content before, I guess, social media became a big thing. It was all on his website, middlehitter.com. I'm sure the youngest person on the screen would probably be Theo, who probably showed up on the recruit list, upcoming recruits, because I don't think Brad was on there. He was on there as a coach, but it's a great place to see middle hitter recruits, D1 and 2 recruits. He covered NAIA and also juniors, Olympic men's and national team, international transfers. I just don't know where he found all that time. He had the middle hitter Pablo rankings. I mean, I'm sure I'm overlooking so much, but I think for me, I personally saw I wanted to see where the recruits are going. So that was a big resource for me. But if any want to chime in, please do, because I know that we jumped on there a few times as a collective.
Yeah. It's middle hitter is one of the first, if not the first, that really kind of combined all the different things that were men's volleyball. And I know for myself personally, there were times where I'd be out recruiting at a tournament and I'd see a kid that maybe I didn't recognize, and I'd scroll through to see if that kid had committed anywhere on middle hitter first. And if their name popped up, then I knew immediately. And that list was pretty spot on and pretty well updated. But, I think you've seen some write-ups in recent weeks, whether on Volley Talk or other places, where, I don't want to say they're complaining. That's the wrong way to do it, but they're complaining that there's not enough men's coverage, like the women's. And it's because of guys like you, Rob, and because of Vinny at Off the Block, and because of Jerry, and because of a few others out there, Kevin Barnett, when he was doing his show. These are people, and I don't know if anybody understands this, they do this for free. They're not being paid. This is not hey, this is my only career. This is something they do out of the pure love of the sport and wanting to help grow the game. And it's gained traction over the years. And I hope somewhere down the line, these things start to pan out into paid gigs, like the women's side. And we can be able to have this stuff continue because it's valuable. And I shudder to think that it just kind of falls by the wayside and never comes around again.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add anything?
Jerry did a great job, like for so long. And probably, I'm not sure as many people know him and the guy that was behind the scenes doing all that stuff. And you get on there and there's so much content that he put on there that was available for people to see, like you just covered, like in terms of just all different levels. And it wasn't just geared towards one. It had section off pages. You could see some rankings. You could see all the stuff that was part of that. And just a lot of thanks to him and his continued growth in a time where men's volleyball didn't have a lot of growth 10, 15 years ago. And he was still doing all that stuff. And so certainly I hope somebody takes that over for him and continues to provide an avenue for all the great information that's on there.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to add? Oh, did he freeze? Did we lose Theo? I think we lost
Theo is frozen in that face right
Frozen.
there.
Nice.
like-
It's kind of like the show, not Pardon the Interruption, but the other one. You know what I'm talking about.
Well, I thought Theo was doing a reenactment of his Pella Windows ad with the still. So, it's interesting. I'll wait for him to come back on, but I guess Jerry sent a release to all the SIDs announcing that this is going to be happening if they want to take over. But this was a great quote from that release. It says, "My thanks always came from the student athletes, coaches at the colleges, clubs, and high school levels, and parents who are assisting their student athletes in researching the next step in our sport. I receive a kind note almost weekly." So that's why we got paid. The gratitude of the people. So, Jerry, great work, and we appreciate it. And Theo, I asked you before you went frozen on your Pella Windows stance, if you had any additional thoughts on middlehitter.com's Jerry Strub retirement.
Yeah, I think these guys hit it on the head, and the amount of loyalty that this game has seen.
And Theo is going to have a rough day today in his internet.
Northridge didn't pay their Wi-Fi bill.
Or Theo's hotspot. He didn't pay for enough data.
And Jerry's a perfect example of it. Here, give me a second. Let me reload it.
Reload you gotta reload the burner phone. Theo's gonna be tracked by the FBI soon here.
Great.
Well, yeah, but there's definitely so many great. I had no idea the extent of it. He also tracked the growth of high school boys volleyball specifically on his site, all the way from the beginning until now. So that's
He did a
pretty
lot.
amazing.
He did an awful lot.
And I only tapped into like maybe 3% of what he was doing on that page too. So, well, we'll go on. It looks like Theo's having some challenges here. He's going on and off on the participant screen. So, and we'll get his thoughts on that. But one article that came out on Christmas Day was the volleyballmag.com's Hotshots. And few men's coaches were recognized in there. And let's just go to Dan first because his guy was on there as well, Jacob Kirshner. Volleyball Mag did this Hotshots appreciating and recognizing some of the top NCAA Division I women's, Division I, II men's, and collegiate beach programs coaches that are behind the scenes. So while Theo's coming on, go ahead, Dan, jump on and talk about the award and Jacob.
Well, I think it's a great thing the AVCA is doing. I think there's a lot of young, talented coaches, and certainly we talk about on the men's side, we need some young, talented coaches because we don't have enough, and we've got more programs popping up each year. So the more coaches we can get involved, the better. And most likely it's going to be those guys on the younger side. So I thought it was a cool piece that they did to recognize all the up and comers in terms of that. And yeah, we were fortunate enough that we certainly have a great young man in Jacob Kirshner who played and who's been coaching now for 5 or 6 years and been involved at a bunch of different levels. And so I'm pretty fortunate to have him in our gym, and I'll be happy to keep him as long as I can because we don't pay enough to keep good guys like that probably. So.
That's what I want to piggyback on. You hit it right there, Dan. The challenge I think you see on the men's side is kind of multifaceted, but the reality is we're not paying enough money to keep them on the men's side. And it's great that they still can find somewhere to bounce on the women's side, but there's men's programs growing at a rapid pace, and we want to see those assistant coaches that are, have been in the game for a long time be able to get a program of their own, see what they can do. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of times these coaches on the men's side, these assistants that are there for a number of years and are piecemealing a bunch of different things. Maybe they're coaching club, maybe they're running clinics, maybe they're doing camps, maybe they're doing the circuit on the summertime, and then just to make ends meet. And after a while, especially if you're getting up in age and maybe you got a wife now and maybe you got kids on the way, it's really, really tough to stay on the men's side. And so I really hope that trend changes in the near future where the men's programs are able to pay some of these coaches what they're worth. And I'm going to give a shout out to one of my guys, Hayden Wagner, getting on that list. Played for me for 4 years or 5 years and was a great player and a great leader. So shout out to that kid. Super stoked for him.
Excellent. We'll go back to Theo now on his burner phone. Final thoughts on middlehitter.com's Jerry Strub. And just so you know, we're on to the Volleyball Mag's Hot Shots article on recognizing some of the D1 and 2 coaches and the men's and women's side in on beach. So go for it, Theo.
Yeah, I look at that list, and for me, it's just it's an ongoing list of just some incredibly talented coaches. And I feel like for years, we've seen some of the coaches that have been staples in our game have come across this list, and it's just great to see some of these guys get a shot out. And I'll echo what Jay said. I think that the finances have really always been the issue. This game has never had a lack in really, really great coaches. But what we have had is just a lack of funding and a lack of support into the ability to keep them on the men's side, and keep them doing great things and continuing to help our game grow. We see talented coaches as good as David Hunt, right? And I think that's and honestly, it's one of those things. Like David Hunt was obviously at the forefront of the men's game and took Pepperdine from obviously a Hall of Fame coach, but was able to keep Pepperdine in a really, really competitive space and did a tremendous job. And even for him, the allure of going to the women's side and being able to be a part of a Power 5 conference and obviously now having won 2 national championships, it was a fantastic move. But as we see a lot of these coaches getting honored and recognition, it'd be nice to see them get compensated just the same.
Yeah.
If I made hey, just so you know, if I made a list of hotshot young head coaches, Theo would for sure be in there, just so you guys know. Theo would be in there. We probably put Birch in there. We probably put Brett. What's neat about the men's game is I think me and Jay are getting old. But if you go look how many some good young coaches we have on the men's game that have stepped in the past 2 or 3 years at different programs. And I know I could list 4 or 5 others at the same time, but and Jay would echo those sentiments. And so, but pretty cool that we've got some of those coaches that are staying on the men's side. And I know we lost Dave, but hopefully we can keep some of those other ones too.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to mention that David Hunt is also on that list as well. And, and actually it brought up, I totally overlooked the fact he took over a program on the men's side from a Hall of Fame coach, led them to a very strong powerhouse program, and then went over to the women's side. So good on David Hunt, and congratulations on that second natty. But I want to recognize some of the other guys who are up and coming names, and proof that a former Pepperdine Wave and a Penn State Nittany Lion can get along. Taylor Hammond and Spencer Wickens are on that list now. Assistants to Costi up at Stanford are on there. You also got, we already mentioned Jacob Kirster. You have the famous duo of Long Beach State, Nick McCrae and McKay Smith on there as well. Luke Maloney, Ohio State assistant coach, and Nick Vogel, the assistant coach at UCLA. So great younger names on the Hot Shots list, and would love for you guys to comment if you guys have anything to say about any of those guys, because anytime a men's volleyball program gets elevated and recognized, I definitely want to bring it up.
Well, you look at Taylor Hammond. He played for me at Penn State when I was there, and a great kid. I tried to get him here. George Mason unfortunately couldn't make the move at the time, but apparently some things have opened up, which is awesome for him and his wife and being able to do that. But you look at some of the other ones. Nick Vogel's been around for a while, and now he's kind of settled in a little bit at UCLA, and he's obviously done some good things there and led him to a championship last year. And you want these guys to be around for a while. Nick McCrae at Long Beach State, there was a moment there where he was starting to branch out and was looking at assisting on the women's side at Long Beach, and I bet it's to do with what Theo was talking about with finances. It's probably paying a ton more for a little bit less work in terms of the grind, but it's just a sign of the times. Dan said it best. We're getting older, and we're going to be the Pete Hansons of the world and the Carl McGowns pretty soon, and we're going to be riding off into the sunset, and we're going to look at some of these guys taking over these programs and guys getting older themselves. Theo's going to be there one day soon, and we're just going to be looking back and sitting there with a cold drink in our hand and just be proud of the work that's gone in over the years.
Being salty on broadcast. That's what you're going to be doing, all you guys, right?
Well, I feel like we continually give a lot of credit to the men's side, and you look at this list, and from McKay Smith to obviously Nick Vogel, and then you've got Alex Dunphy, right, who obviously started on the men's side and had a ton of experience there before she moved over. Tyler Hildebrand, right, who's on this list, but is also started on the men's side, had a tremendous volleyball playing career, and it's just really cool. Jalen Reyes, right, and then Jalen Reyes, right, again, another standout coach who again started his career, on the men's side, and just incredibly proud of the work that these guys have done. But it's just really cool to see the number of quality coaches that the men's game has produced and their ability to take that knowledge and continue to grow it.
And let's hope that those young coaches, when they get their jobs at their next program as a head coach somewhere, that they start banging on the drum a little bit louder than the previous coaches on the women's side to get men's programs at their places. These coaches have a duty to the game that gave them what they're doing now. And I find it sad that we haven't been able to get much movement, but the next generation could be the guys that actually get it done. And so I implore them to go bang on the door of their AD and say, hey, we need a men's program here. And hopefully in the next, 10 years or so, we start to see some of those doors open up.
Yeah. Anything else to add, gentlemen, as we go on to our next topic? Good. All right. In that time, since our last episode, the Conference Carolinas preseason poll came out. Just to go to the top three, North Greenville 1. You got Erskine at 2, and now King at 3, which is where King started last year in the preseason poll and ended up in the NCAA tournament. So that's out, but I wanted to get the guys' thoughts on the off-the-block preseason All-Americans, if they had a chance to look at it. I'll mention some of the players on the first team, well, for the first team, but setter, Andrew Rowan, UCLA, opposite, Ito David from UCLA, opposite, Parker Van Buren from Loyola, outsides are Spiros Hakas, Hawaii, Ethan Champlin, UCLA, Halira Heno, UC Irvine, Jacob Pastor, Ohio State. Middle attackers now, Toby Eziano of Penn State, Merrick McHenry, UCLA, Simon Torwey, Long Beach State, Guillermo Voss of Hawaii, and Libero Mason Briggs. Thoughts on the first team OTB preseason All-Americans? And let's go with Theo.
Yeah, I mean, shoot. I think that of those names that were listed here, we absolutely, I think, mentioned them in our first preview show. And I mean, the talent on this list is incredible. And I think we're actually getting to a point, and I think, obviously you hinted at the potential of a top 20, but there are so many talented players. And the guys that are on this list are absolutely no slouch. There's not one guy there that I don't think belongs. You potentially could swap a couple in that are right at that same level. But I mean, this is an absolutely talented group, and obviously UCLA leading the way with 4 guys on that list. I mean, that was the national championship team, and all of these guys are back for another run. This list is absolutely stellar. Really well put together and incredibly talented for sure.
All right. Good stuff. Dan.
I play every one of these teams this year.
Good luck.
Oh yeah. God. Yeah, we're gonna see. Anyway, I echo Theo's. I mean, these guys, there's some phenomenal players on here. I always am curious, like, we'll have this combo in April or whatever, but like, I like to pull this list up again and look at it and go, who's now on this? Like a lot of these guys will be on it, but there'll be some new guys be like, man, that guy really came out of nowhere here. This is an upcoming guy. And we can't name those guys right now, but like, that's always exciting because, certainly a bunch of these guys will be on there, but who will be the new ones, or who will be the new talented guys that are kind of fill some of these spots where maybe these guys didn't repeat the same performance they had. Do you know what I mean? In terms of that stuff. And so.
Good stuff. Jay.
Yeah, I think that list, I think 95% of them are guys that I put on there or picked to be on there. And I think, Theo touched upon it. The top 20 for the AVCA rankings is a great step in the right direction because we're expanding. Here first, what about third team All-American, like the women's side? And I'm not saying that it needs to happen this year, but we're expanding. We're going from 8 teams to 12 teams. We've gone from top 15 now to top 20. Pretty soon, you're going to see names like that, there's going to be another 15 to 20 guys that are worthy of being on that list because there are so many programs out there, and we have to start thinking about that. So I'm throwing it out there to the gods. Third team All-American could be something we're looking at in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't think it's now, but I think 3 to 5 years.
Rattle the cage of the AVCA come the end of the season, right? Hint, hint.
I got it. Come on, guys. I think I'm moving the needle a little bit. Leave me alone.
Dan, you're doing a great job. Just round out the second team preseason honorees. Setters, Dan Mangan from Loyola, Nick Slight from Grand Canyon. Opposites, Camden Gianni of Grand Canyon and Clark Godbold of Long Beach State. Outside attackers, John Dietrich of Purdue Fort Wayne. Jackson Hickman, Grand Canyon. Dylan Klein at USC. Alex Knight at UCLA. Hiroishi and Davovacheva at Ball State. Will Rotman at Stanford. Sotir Shapanis at Long Beach State. Middle attacker Tion Taylor at BYU. And Libro Ryan Merck of Penn State. I'm curious if there are guys that could be in there that, like, maybe one or two from you guys just to stoke the fire. Oh, Theo's raising his hand. I like it.
Ben Harrington.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, I feel like, there's going to be, every year, there's going to be tons of guys that get left off. But that guy was an absolute monster against us last year, and obviously coming back and poised for another season. But I was surprised to not see him on this list, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the second team list is the one that at the end of the year, you're going to see a bunch of first year guys, not necessarily freshmen, but maybe first year players, because now we're at the end of COVID, right? Now the guys have all matriculated on, and now you've got a group of guys that maybe have not gotten much, if any, playing time in the last few years. Look at John Kerr at Penn State. Kid sat behind the opposite Fisher for 4 years, and the guy's like, it's finally my time, and he's a grad student. So you're going to see names that you probably haven't heard of in recent years. I bet we talked about in that circle, especially this year.
Yeah. Anyone to add, Dan?
Yeah, I just like Dan Magnum, he was hurt all fall. I don't know the other injuries on some of these guys, so hopefully he's back and healthy. And because I know we're going to talk about key matches, but Loyola opens up in Hawaii, and they've got a couple other talented setters, but he was a big piece for them. And I don't know if there's any injuries on this list, either first or second team of guys in the fall, but that always plays into it a little bit. You know what I mean? Guys' health and where they're at and what they're able to kind of do. And is Camden Gianni like a 7th year volleyball player now? I'm just trying to figure that out. He cannot win Freshman of the Year anymore, just so we all understand that.
First year graduate student of the year.
And John Dietrich, he's like under the radar guy, putting up big numbers for a few years. And, Rock's got a kind of a couple senior pieces, and Bryce Walker and him and a couple other guys on that team. So does Fort Wayne make a little bit of a move this year with some of those pieces that are kind of been around a while? So
yeah, with the amount of swings that guy takes and his age, he should be getting an NIL deal from duct tape and ibuprofen. There's some massive financial opportunities for that kid. The kid's a beast.
What Jay can't add is if he does, I want 2% of your 10% cut.
Yeah, you heard it here first. I'll be your agent. We'll make it work. I might have a few connections for the ibuprofen older age gentleman people connections. I might.
No, Jay, that's Gold Bond. That's different.
Oh yeah, that's huge. Huge. Thank God for Gold Bond. What a party in your pants, huh?
Gone off the rails since only January 2nd. Oh my gosh.
I'm at an age now where I don't care if I get in trouble from the honks out there. So it's all good.
Well, I'm going to throw some out there that I'm surprised I didn't see. But here's a good one. Brett Sheward, formerly of Hawaii, now UCI, taking over setting duties. Teo Snui of Stanford, freshman opposite last season, was impressive. Chaz Galloway, I mean, high flyer, one of the most entertaining players to see. And Mix Romanis of BYU, flying below the radar. So, but pretty good list, I thought, overall. I mean, I was like, yeah, I can't say no to that. I mean, again, Dan brings up the injuries. We don't know how healthy they're going to be come start of the season, but that's when everyone's getting a feel anyways. So, which brings us to our next segment. I've got to start. I wasn't, ignoring you guys. I was looking at the text that Brad Rostratter, who normally would be on with us, but for some reason, UC San Diego had practice this morning at our recording time. So, but we're going to go to our matches to watch in week 1 of our 13 regular season weeks of or actually is it 15 regular season weeks of the NCAA Division 1-2 season. So Brad is watching Ball State at BYU, which is a pair, Loyola at Hawaii. And then basically it's not George Mason, it's Jay versus UC San Diego and Jay versus CSUN. So with that, I'm going to pull up my list and you guys are going to have your choices. What are you guys telling the fans to watch, or what are you keeping your eye on as we enter week 1 of play? Let's go with Dan first.
I don't know, well, it's the Santa Barbara tournament in general. I mean, there's a lot of key matchups there. Is that where you guys are playing at, Jay, or is that separate? That's where you guys. Yeah. So I just think we could list all those matches there. I think there's some intriguing, really high level early volleyball, which I think is key. So certainly there's some bragging rights on the show as we get on the show after that as well. Do you know what I mean? But probably we try to pick one that you hadn't picked up yet. But Loyola's plays Stanford too. So you talked about Loyola Hawaii, but there's a Loyola Stanford match as well, which I think is key early. Like Loyola's kind of really testing themselves out of the gate. You'll kind of see that, but I think that'll be a big match as well, and us seeing Stanford kind of out of the gates as well against a tough opponent.
See, on the Loyola situation, I picked them. I call it the Gates of Mordor matches to start the season. It's Loyola. They're at Hawaii for 2, at Stanford for 2, play BYU the following week, and UCLA. But easy schedule, no problem. They got that. So, but let's go over to Jay.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a little brief history. The Santa Barbara tournament, when I used to play in it, this is way back in the day, had 30.
The Elephant Bar, huh?
Yeah, the Elephant Bar had 32 teams, a bunch of D3s, bunch of NAIAs, some club programs that go there back in the day, like Sac State and Fresno State and Cal Berkeley. And you would play the first day on Friday, and the top 2 teams from every pool would go into the power pool the following day, which was all the top teams would play against each other. I'll never forget UCLA's big thing was Al Skates would never coach on Friday. He would go play golf. And the seniors on that team would coach their team into the power pool the next day. And then Al Skates would walk in on Saturday morning, all nice and tan, his fingers freshly pickled from the cocktails the night before. And he would coach his team up. And it was a great time. And it was a lot of volleyball. I think it was 2 out of 3 to 15 back in the day. But you played like 5 matches on Friday and 5 matches on Saturday. You were just gassed, but it was a lot of fun to be a part of. So from that perspective, I'm absolutely going to be excited to watch and play in these matches. It's the first time I've been back ever since I got into coaching, and super stoked to see Theo and see Brad and get to see Rick and play against them and see where we stack up against things. And it's going to be some good volleyball, I think. I think these teams are all pretty solid. And I'm going to be looking at Loyola Hawaii. I want to see where Loyola fits in that whole thing, because I think they're gonna surprise a few people. I think Hawaii might be in for a little bit more than they bargained for in the beginning of the year. But kudos to Hawaii stacking a good team like that in the beginning of the season. Let's get after it. So kudos to you, Charlie.
Supposedly Hawaii picked up a French guy or a Spaniard at the semester. So
Gladiator.
Yep.
Spaniard.
Yes. So we'll see where he fits in. Oh, and I want to see which setter won the battle.
Yeah.
I don't have,
Yeah, I bet you'd be looking at that.
That's some hot chatter. I've heard Calling. I've heard Rosenthal. So
I don't know.
All right, Theo, you're up.
Yeah. So here's the ones we haven't mentioned. Obviously, the Santa Barbara tournament's going to be awesome. Super excited about that. But we got to see what Lewis is doing against Penn State. I think that's going to be one hell of a matchup. Very, 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 very high level and really interesting because I think Lewis is a team that's just getting better from where they were last year. Penn State loses some important pieces, but still has Toby and still is incredibly deep. So it'll be interesting to see what that team looks like, especially in the early parts of the year. And I'm picking Lewis to win that one. And then
Woo!
yeah, I'm throwing that out there, Dan.
Thanks.
I'm throwing that out there. And then Damon and Ohio State. I think that'll be really interesting too. I think Damon lost some pieces, but it'll be really interesting to see Ohio State, especially early in the year, and see kind of where they're at. And then the other matches that I'm pretty intrigued by is the UCLA matchups against Fort Valley State and Morehouse. I think those are going to be really, really cool matches. It's nice to see that stuff early in the year, and be cool to see some interesting upsets out of some of these matches too.
It's a good call. Actually, I wanted to mention that they're calling it the SoCal HBCU Challenge. That's the team of Fort Valley State and Morehouse College facing UCLA, Pepperdine, and USC on over 3 days. So, but it's super cool in that I caught some social media from Fort Valley State, and those guys are excited to be in California. Like, you could see the excitement and enthusiasm. It's like it's our first time to Cali ever, but we're looking forward to playing some really good teams. So just seeing the way the program's grown and seeing the kind of enthusiasm these guys have, I'm really excited to see. Hopefully they're streaming them. So with that, yes,
I just want to just kudos to John and Nygar and UCLA and SC and First Point. I mean, those guys. Some people don't know this, but I think they're helping with some of the finances on that side of that to help those teams and those kids have that opportunity. And there's a little bit of praise that needs to go to those guys for making something like that happen. And, not all programs are in a situation to kind of do that. And those programs are taking the means and making that happen. And I really impacted some of those kids and those programs to go in the right direction.
Oh, great call, Dan. There was one player I wanted to go back to. I felt that on the off the block preseason All-American, because Dan's going to be playing against Michal Koval, has been such a solid force for Penn State. And he just gets overlooked because he's got so many other big names around him, but he'll be fun to watch. So we'll get the scouting report from Dan firsthand next Monday. So is there anything else that we have missed, gentlemen, that we should bring up? Guess not. So with that,
well, Jay brought it up, but you haven't talked about it. Are you waiting until it actually comes out tomorrow?
I said I promised I wouldn't break it.
Oh.
No, it's not a, and Dan can attest this. It's not a secret. We're not trying to hide it from anybody. But the AVCA is going to top 20 this year, and here's where I will tell anybody who complains about this. The reality is this. The game has grown to a level where we have more teams that deserve to get recognized. And I know we're not at the level yet of the women's side, but we have expanded quite a bit. The top 15 of years past is now going to be top 20. I think the fact remains is that the top 5 or so, top 5, 6, 7 are probably going to stay somewhere in that level. They're just that good, kind of like on the women's side. But 8 through 15 are probably going to start interchanging themselves a little bit. We need to start paying attention to that. And then there's a few teams on the perimeter where in years past, maybe some voters like myself or Dan or Theo or somebody else might go, hey, let's throw a little love to this team because they're having a good week. And the number 15 team might be underwater. They might have a win-loss record that's underwater. Let's give this team a little bit of recognition. Now we'll be able to give those teams some of that recognition. And I think, I'm going to speak for myself, but I bet you I'm not the only one on the voting committee. To the other voters that are out there that are doing their job of actually watching and reading and seeing and doing all those things and taking that poll seriously, kudos to you for doing a great job. We see you and see what you're voting. For those of you that don't care and just mail it in and you look at their rankings and it hardly ever changes and they're never giving anybody love. You got to do better, man. You got to do better. And I'm throwing it out there. And if you want to hate me for it, you can hate me for it. But there's a large number of us on that voting committee that do our homework. And I'm proud of those guys and girls for that matter. And for people doing their jobs the right way.
Yep. Anything else, gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that, I think we talked about it a ton in this show last year, but there was so much parity between that 8 to 15. And we saw teams just beating up on each other left and right. And it became incredibly difficult to eliminate guys completely from the top 15, eliminate teams completely from the top 15, but also try and squeeze in other teams, right? Just for an example, Lincoln Memorial, Charleston, Damon, King, all had weeks on weeks last year where we were talking about them on this show. They needed credibility for what they were doing in the volleyball that they were playing, but there just wasn't a way to take a USC, a Stanford, a BYU out of the top 15 in order to replace them with a team that maybe wasn't seeing the same type of competition on a nightly basis. And the picture gets clearer later as you go through the season, but it's incredibly difficult, and our game is really, really competitive. And to see us go into a top 20, I really think there's a lot of value there for the amount of time, effort, and energy these student athletes are putting in, time, effort, and energy these coaching staffs are putting in, and just the quality of the product that they're playing at. It's just, I really think this is going to be a game changer for our sport. I really do.
Yeah.
There's two pieces for people to understand. So like, and I'll echo what Jay and Theo were saying, but like if I'm a program and you're building and you're ranked 17th or 18th in these new rankings, it is a sell to your recruits, it is a sell to your administration, and it promotes what you're doing. It's same reason a few years back we added honorable mention. So on the All-American stuff, we've gone from 10 to 12 on first team and 10 to 12 on second team. A few years back, we added honorable mentions, and it was kind of the same thing. It was like, how do we recognize these programs, these athletes, these institutions in terms of what they're doing? And we added these 20 or 25 honorable mention, and we recognize these kids, and you can sell it in your program, and it recruits more kids, and that's really what it's about. So yeah, we'll have a couple naysayers, but we're doing the right thing by men's volleyball and the athletes and the coaches and the administrations that it support. And that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to get a little bit more recognition and value all that stuff. Like schools like Lincoln Memorial, which would probably be consistently in the top 20 because of what he's been doing every year, you know what I mean, in terms of that, and some other programs that get a little bit more love because it's hard to kind of etch them in sometimes on those other spots. And so I'm excited we got that piece moved forward and through, and again, just celebrates what we're doing.
Yeah. I definitely agree, because there's definitely teams that schedule tough. And like I mentioned, the Gates of Mordor schedule for Loyola, but I mean, they're coaches on the screen. I know you're scheduling tough and you want to get the most out of your guys and see what you got in those pressure situations. I get it. And there's guys like UC Santa Barbara, they just play the tough guys, and come pro season, everyone's afraid of them. And their record may be, 5-15, but you still don't want to play them. So with that concludes our week 1 preview. You got it from the voices and the visions on the screen, with the exception of Brad Rothstetter, who was in through text, but that's Jay Hossick of George Mason, Dan Friend of Lewis, Theo Edwards of CSUN, and not present, but here in spirit, Brad Rothstetter of UC San Diego. And I think you guys are all traveling this week, aren't you? You're all away.
Yep.
Well, then, to all of you, best of luck and definitely safe travels, and look forward to chatting next week.
Thanks for listening to College Volleyball Weekly. Be sure to follow Rob Aspero at The Rob on the Mic on Instagram and at Rob on the Mic on Twitter.